Hello there, and welcome to A Walk in My Shoes. My name is Kayla Powell, and I'm filling in for Dan today. And with us, we have Jan Raymer, who is the Vice President of the Wilds. Welcome, Jan, and thanks for being with us today.
Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I really look forward to interacting with you.
Awesome. So, Jan, we can just start by how you got into your position at the Wilds, if you were promoted within the company, and just a little bit of background about yourself and maybe the Wilds as well.
Great. Well, I was president of the Wilds for about 3 years, but I started here in 2015 as a veterinarian, the director of animals. So I'm a veterinary training, and started in that position, and really my boss at the time invested me in the position, and I accepted, and I'm loving leading. This is a wonderful place. We do so much wonderful conservation work with our animals, the land that our animals are situated on, conservation and education work as well.
That's awesome. Well, congratulations on the promotion. I know it's been a while, but that's awesome to hear that they promote from within. So, can you tell us a little bit how you got into the veterinary field and maybe a little bit about your education and how you got to where you are today?
Absolutely. So, yeah, I grew up in Indiana, so not too far from here in Indianapolis. And while I was in high school, I really wanted to be a veterinarian and or a zookeeper. Those are the two things that I wanted to be. So I really concentrated in the sciences. I attended Purdue University, where I studied pre-veterinary medicine. But while I was there, I started to take animal behavior classes, and I loved it. So I actually switched my major. I majored in biology with an emphasis on behavior, and that gave me an opportunity to do one of the two things I wanted to be as an adult, and I became a zookeeper. And I worked at the Brookfield Zoo in Chicago for about 10 years as a zookeeper, and I worked with an apes. It was great. But while I was a zookeeper, I moved into different positions of management, and I got to the place where I started thinking about being a veterinarian again. So my path from high school to veterinary school, 10 years of job, and then I decided to go to vet. So at age 35, never too late, I packed up my children and moved to Madison, Wisconsin, and went to veterinary school at the University of Wisconsin. From there, I knew I wanted to get back into wildlife one way or another, but I needed to learn medicine. So I did private for 4 years in Madison until I secured a job. So I was the veterinarian at the Indianapolis Zoo for 14 years. And it's a wonderful zoo if you find yourself in Indianapolis for any reason. But really, my dream job became available while I was in Indianapolis, and I was given a leave of absence to go live in Africa. So I worked in Rwanda for 3.5 years, and I led a group called Gorilla Doctors, and these are African veterinarians that look after the health of mountain gorillas in eastern Congo and southern Uganda with a woman. And so I was there until 2015, and at that point, this job here, and at the same time, I became a grandmother. So it was important for me to be back in the United States so I could be with my grandson. And I started working at the Wild. So in a nutshell, that's kind of the crazy trajectory of my career. I think one of the things I'd like to say to the people who are listening is you never let go of your dream. I wanted to be a keeper or veterinarian. Somehow, I've been so lucky that I was able to do both of the things that I really wanted to do as a little girl. And I also got my dream job to work in Africa, and I didn't get that job until I was in my late 50s. So it's always important to hang on to your dreams, and maybe you can find a way to get there in a
Yeah.
surprising way.
Well, that's definitely an interesting career path. It sounds
we do here. And one of our high school programs, which is the 16 to 18-year-olds, is called Dirty Wild Jobs. And that camp are for campers that really want to learn about veterinary medicine or animal management. And so the mornings are spent either with the veterinarians or the animal managers learning what we not beautiful this year. And we budgeted differently for next year. And that's something as an administrator that you become very involved with. But I think that, yes, we ended the year, we're going to end the year better than we thought we did when COVID first started.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear that. And yeah, next year, hopefully this will all be cleared up by the springtime and you guys will be back to running a more normal operation.
Well, fingers crossed.
Yes. Yeah. So let's talk about COVID. What were some of the extra measures that you guys had to take besides social distancing? And were some of the animals like not allowed to be seen by the public anymore? Were there certain areas you guys had to rope off differently? What did that look like for you guys?
Businesses were really challenged. All businesses were challenged with coming up with a new way to be with the COVID safety guidelines. For us, I worked very closely with the Muskingum County Public Health Department, and we came up with, the directors and I came up with some very strict and good guidelines for how we would run our restaurant based on the state of Ohio's restaurant rules, how we would run our retail, how we would run our overnight accommodation. So all of those things were based on the state of Ohio guidelines. And then for our tours, we just were very careful about making sure that there were the appropriate amounts of distancing between people on our bus tours and our truck tours. Now, we do know, if I put my veterinary hat on, we do know that there are some big cats that can get this virus and can get sick. There were some lions and tigers at the Bronx Zoo in New York that were shown to get the virus and get sick. They recovered. So that made us have to really think about some of our animals. And so our cheetahs are still on public display. People can come and see them, but we don't let people get as close as we used to, just to make sure that they stay safe. And we're learning a lot about the virus. So as we learn more, we can either reduce restrictions or add restrictions as we learn more about the virus. But all in all, as I was saying before, because we are an outdoor facility, people have come to visit us and I think they have felt comfortable and safe, and that has been nice.
That's awesome. And talking about safety, are there any dangers of your job, safety precautions that you have to take while working with the animals?
Yeah, so every job has there are certain things that you have to be careful about, and we work with some very, very big animals. And so we always, whenever you work with an animal, either as a zookeeper in my previous career, as a veterinarian, you need to know the behavior of that species, the behavior of that individual animal, and you need to know your safety margins and what part of the animal can hurt you, for example. And we are very, very careful with our large animals. We can use, for example, our rhinos. Those are, 4,000 or 5,000 pound animals. I'm not going to be able to manhandle that animal and make sure that it sits like we can a dog. But what we can do is, with positive reinforcement training, those rhinos will allow us to draw blood while they eat their grain. And so our animal managers have been really great at doing all kinds of management training so that the animals are happy. They will do the things we need them to do to monitor their health and keep them healthy without any danger to either the animal or the animal management. Now, if there are times when we need to, for example, if an animal gets hurt and we need to anesthetize it, we have very well-developed protocols, both for the drugs and for how we manage the animals under anesthesia. And we have such a great team here. Everybody looks out for each other. We look out for the animals, and we really can lean on each other and rely on each other. And we do everything that we can to keep both the animal and the humans safe during any kind of a procedure.
That's great. Not only at the wilds, but in your previous careers out in Africa and Indianapolis, do you think your life was ever in danger with an animal?
That's a good question. There certainly are times when your heart rate goes up, when you have that kind of fight or flight response. I can't think of a time when I really felt like my life was in danger during an animal procedure as a veterinarian. Um, uh, there are times when there is certainly potential for something to go differently than you expect, but we have so many protocols in place. Now there were times in Africa where I felt threatened, but more by people than by animals, to tell you the truth. That there are parts of Africa where I work that are a little bit unstable, and so we were usually surrounded by the UN, and so there were times when there was an element of heightened concern, I would say, but not because I was worried about. Now I did one time get a silverback gorilla, but I didn't to hurt me. He was just know that he was in. So that does happen, but I did not feel endangered at that time. I was surprised, but I didn't feel endangered.
And how big was that gorilla?
Oh well, silverback adult male gorillas are 400-ish pounds,
Wow.
big, big boy.
Yeah.
But again, most of the time with gorillas, they're displaying. They're just letting you know. And so he was just letting me know that I was there looking at his daughter who had been injured, and he was kind of worried about her, and he saw me looking at her with binoculars, and he kind of shoved me out of the way. But it was all good. It's all fine. And it turns out she was injured, but not badly enough to need our intervention.
Good. Good. So I'm sure that you've learned a lot along your way into the position you're in now. Are there some things that you wish you knew when you started school and when you were a rookie? Are there some things you wish that you knew right then that you didn't have to learn the hard way?
That's an interesting question. I think that I have learned to be a little bit more patient as I get older, because I when I graduated from veterinary school, I wanted to get that zoo job right now, and took a little bit longer to get it than I wanted. I think that when I started my when I started an undergraduate career, I really thought I wanted to be a veterinarian, but I switched, as I mentioned, into biology. And I think if I had, I think that my path probably was the right for me. And I don't know honestly how much time I might have said I want to do this right now, but I wouldn't have learned the things that I learned had I not taken the path that I took. So, I guess advice for young people who are starting their careers or thinking about careers is to know that a decision that you make today isn't the last decision that you're going to make in your life. You will have opportunities to change, and your route from A to B may be very circuitous, but you'll learn things along the way as long as you keep your eye on the prize. And the fact is, the prize might change, right? As you learn more, you might change what you think you want to do and adjust your goals accordingly. So would I change things or give myself advice? Maybe just to continue to be patient and be open to learning all along the way.
Yes. Yeah. I completely agree with you. I think everything happens for a reason, and I was put in this situation to learn. So always trying to learn more. And I'm sure you learn things every day about the different animals. And yes, yes. So talking about,
I would have to say, I think that the other thing that I have learned is that very seldom do things just land in your lap. It happens. it does happen, but then the next step then is to do the work to make yourself successful. But sometimes you have to work really, really hard to get to that next step. And that might mean studying biology really hard in school, or finding somebody who does what you do and learning from them, finding a mentor, in other words, getting a part-time job in the area that you think you might like, just to see if you like it. But I think it takes the work to really get yourself from A to B, and that work is schoolwork. That work is talking to people. That work is putting yourself out there, even when it's uncomfortable sometimes.
Yes. So talking about schoolwork, do you have to have a degree to be a zookeeper, or could someone work their way up without having their degree, but maybe just start out as a helper, an entry-level position on your staff?
That's a great question. And right now, working as an animal manager or zookeeper is an extremely, extremely competitive job. And I would say 99% of our animal managers and zookeepers at Columbus Zoo and here at the Wilds have at least an associate's degree, if not a bachelor's degree, and some even have master's degrees, either in animal management or biology or animal behavior, those kinds of things. Really, really competitive. So the foot in the door is maybe to get a seasonal job, but even those seasonal keepers usually at least have an associate's degree. But you can even get those seasonal jobs while you're in school and help you put yourself through school. But it's pretty competitive, but certainly not impossible to break into the field.
Okay. All right. I have a question about the animals themselves. And where do the managers and zookeepers find these animals? And how do you decide which ones are going to come in?
And the Wilds, along with all the other zoos that you hear about in Ohio and many nationwide, are part of a much larger organization called the American Zoo and Aquarium Association. And the animals in our care, the large majority of them were born in other zoos like ours. And so there's a larger organization that is actually looking after the genetic care of each of those species. So believe it or not, for gorillas, for example, there is a committee called Species Survival Plan that acts kind of like a dating service, so to speak. And so they look at all the gorillas in the country, sometimes in the world, or in North America, and they kind of look at, well, who let's say Gorilla Alice over here needs a husband, and so we find somebody that she's not related to, that has similar behavioral characteristics, that maybe they could get along and become a family. And so we work with zoos all over the country for all of our species to make sure we have good genetic diversity, that our collections are healthy. So animals move between our institutions. Very, very, very rarely are animals taken from the wild, and in those instances, it's usually because there's a patch of the wild that is going to go away, and those animals aren't going to have a home anymore. So it's very, very rare that animals are taken from the wild. Often now zoos are back into the wild. As an example, in both the Columbus Zoo and the Wilds work with hellbenders, which is this giant salamander. It's the largest salamander in North America, the third largest salamander in the world. They're big. They're like a salamander this big. And we breed them and raise them up until they're about 3 or 4 years old. So they're kind of small. They live a long time. And they are reintroduced to appropriate streams in Ohio and West Virginia. So now we're giving back. And at the Wilds here, we have an antelope called the scimitar horned oryx that was extinct in North Africa for 30 years. And believe it or not, we were involved in a group of zoos and other organizations that reintroduced this animal. And there are 3 scimitar horned oryx in the country of Chad in North Africa that were born right here in southeastern Ohio. And so they have been reintroduced and are no longer extinct.
Wow. That's awesome. And that's so awesome that you can say that you were a part of that, right?
Exactly right. That's pretty much full circle. That, for those of us that work in this field, that is the utmost honor to be involved in something like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. So a little more about the animals. Maybe doesn't happen as much at the wilds, but have you ever had an animal escape the zoo or the wilds, and how do you handle that?
Well, it happens just about anywhere, including my house when my dog gets out the front door. It's very, very, very rare. We have so many fail safes in all institutions in North America. It's very rare, and when it does happen, we have protocols in place, safety protocols both for the animal and for the people, and the animal is generally recovered as quickly as possible.
Okay. And this is sad, but when an animal is nearing the end of its life, how do you decide when is the right time to put it down? And then what do you do with the animal after that needs to be done?
Yeah, so we have plans for animals. We look at the welfare of the animal throughout its life. Every individual animal at the wilds and at the Columbus Zoo um, has a welfare assessment done at least twice a year. And we look at the animal, we look at all aspects of that animal's welfare and do an assessment. And how can we improve that animal's welfare? If the animal's doing great, that's wonderful, and we have that recorded. And those welfare assessments are really, really important. Now, if an animal gets sick or gets injured or is getting old, and I always like to say age is not a disease because I'm kind of getting old too, but we continually do those welfare assessments. And if we need to do more, if an animal begins to lose weight or is injured in some way, we do them more frequently and as we apply treatments. And just like you would with your cat or your dog at home, we sometimes make the decision that for humane reasons, it's time to let the animal go. We always then, I put my scientist hat on and my veterinary hat on. We do a post-mortem examination. We want to learn why that animal passed away. And so we do an examination and learn that is carefully buried here on property.
Okay.
But for the majority of animals, we are so interested in maintaining that excellent amount of welfare that we're constantly looking at these animals and assessing their welfare needs.
Yeah. So between their welfare assessments, say they come down with a cold, I'm not sure what you would call it in your field, but how would you know if something's not right with this animal? What are some signs that you typically see? Do they stay away from their pack? Do they stay away from you?
So that's a great question, and that's where we really rely on our animal managers and animal keepers. And having been an animal keeper for 12 years, I remember those times very well. So those people, the animal managers and the animal keepers, are just like you guys are with your dogs and cats. They know those animals inside out. And they're just like the trackers were with the gorillas that I worked with in Central Africa. They know the animals so well that when your dog or cat is sick, right? There's just something a little bit off. Maybe you don't even know exactly what it is, but you know in your head, and so you become alert and you watch the animal. And that's what happens with our animals here. They know if something's just a little bit off. Maybe she's going to give birth, or maybe she stepped on a rock and has a bruise on her foot or something like that. And they really know. So as a veterinarian, what I have learned is if a keeper or animal manager comes to me and says, "Hey, Sally is really something's wrong. I can't put my finger on it," I pay attention and I will go and put a veterinary eyes on that animal. Same thing, with dogs or cats or with the gorillas. You go and put your veterinary eyes on them and just see if there's anything you can see that would determine whether or not you want to. You're always doing a risk benefit, right? The risk of separating the animal to do an examination and maybe even anesthesia versus the benefit. And so at some point together, the veterinarians and the animal managers, just like you do with your doctor or you do with your veterinarian for your animal, we together come up with a decision and a plan for the animal, whether we're going to do some diagnostics or do some treatment or just watch and maybe they're going to get over it. But it all is a matter of having people around those animals every single day who get eyes on them and determine, their general health. So the animal welfare assessments I spoke of that are twice a year, that's a very detailed list that we make sure we check off. But the animals are looked at every single day, and those managers really know them well. So they have a really good rapport with the animals.
Yeah. So It sounds like you and your colleagues don't really have the typical 9 to 5 Monday through Friday work schedule. What does your typical work week look like? How many hours? When do you come in? Are you on call at any time?
Right? So we can't just work 9 to 5 Monday through Friday. We always have animal managers here every single day. So as an animal manager, my schedule used to be I used to work Tuesday through Saturday. So I worked every Tuesday through Saturday, and then I had Sunday, Monday off for many, many, many years. And other people had staggered schedules, right? Because we always have to have somebody here, even on a weekend. Veterinarians are always on call, and there are many, many weekends when you may or may not have had plans, and you end up coming in here, even if it's just to check on an animal. But we trade off the call, so we do get to have vacations or weekends off because we trade off the call. But the other piece is we are open to the public, right? So our you know, guests looking to be here all the time too. So the tour guides are here, the food service, all of the housekeeping. Those people are here all the time, and we even have to have people here at night for our overnight guests. So lots of really creative scheduling. And the other people that have to be on call that you don't always think about are our facilities people. So they are here to make sure that our buses run, that our cars run, that our buildings are maintained, that the furnace broke, and so that has to be fixed. And maybe the furnace broke at Rhino, and we've got a baby rhino. That's got to be fixed right now. And so it's not just a matter of convenience. Sometimes it's a matter of the safety of our animals or our guests. So our facilities people are also on call 24/7, and they may have to come in to fix something if it's broken and it becomes an animal health or safety issue. So
Yes.
lots of different things to think about in this industry, because we have living things that are depending on us for their lives and welfare.
Right. A lot of planning and coordination, a lot of people probably don't think about.
That's right. I like to say that there's more going on behind the scenes in our institution than you see when you go on a tour, to tell you the truth.
Yes. Yes, you're exactly right. So I do have a question that someone wrote in. How do you continue your learning about the animals? I know you have hands-on learning every day, but do you do any research? Do you have some websites that you check out? Do you enroll in any courses?
Right. So as a veterinarian, I am required, in order to maintain my license in the state of Ohio, to do continuing education, a certain number of hours of continuing education each year. So when I renew my license, I have to show that I've done this continuing education. So not only for licensing purposes, but also just to make sure that I'm understanding what the new aspects of veterinary medicine are. I attend conferences. This year, our conferences were virtual, but it was still really good. We could still see all of the talks. And at those conferences, some of the cutting edge information is given about our field. There's the American Association of Zoo Veterinarians and the American Association of Wildlife Veterinarians. And so those are really good conferences to attend. We also have journals, and that's one of the things I like to do is not only read the journals, the articles that pertain to the animals that are in our care, but we also like to contribute. So when we have an interesting case here, we will frequently write that or a series of cases, we will write up an article and submit it to a peer-reviewed publication, which means this is one that is actually reviewed by other veterinarians and accepted on the merit of its science. And so we not only read to increase our education, but we contribute to that body of literature as well. And now that I'm an administrator, I also attend the American Zoo and Aquarium Association annual meeting. And that is so that I can learn more about administrative responsibilities and some of the new techniques in marketing, or some of the new ways that you can reach more children, local children. For example, we do some outreach in the local schools here in Muskingum County, and so at my American Zoo and Aquarium Association meeting, there is a whole section on education, so I can go learn what is the latest and greatest in outreach and apply that here at the Wild. So there's lots of different ways that we can continue to learn, and it can be as esoteric as, how to treat the bump on the leg of a turtle to something as practical as how to run summer camp better.
Yeah. Well, it sure sounds like you have a lot on your plate. Like we just said, it's a lot of planning and coordination people don't necessarily think about. With all of the different hats that you have to wear each and every day, how do you stay motivated? Do you ever just feel down like, wow, this is a lot? Do you ever feel like you can't handle it?
Whoa, that's a loaded question. This has been a year, hasn't it? This has been a challenging year. Um, but I think the thing that keeps me motivated is this place and this team. And this is one of the most hardworking and dedicated teams I have ever worked with. And I will walk through fire for this team, to tell you the truth. And I think that, and knowing what we have, I'm looking out my window now at some of the pastures, what we have here, and the animals that rely on us, the guests that rely on us, it's an awesome responsibility, but I mean awesome in a really good way, in that we have so much to work with here, such a great team, such a great product. We're doing such wonderful and important conservation and conservation education work. That's what keeps me motivated. Do I have days? Absolutely. There might be some eye rolls on any given morning. But I think, as I was mentioning earlier, one of the things I try to do when I'm having one of those mornings is to keep my eye on the prize. Is, okay, there's the wild, and there are people and animals depending on us, and we do good in the world. So let's keep doing it to the best of our ability.
Yes. All right. We do have another question here, and it's back to the animals. What about endangered species? Do you have some of them at the wilds? Did you have some in your previous experience? And how do you handle that?
Really good question, and one that's near and dear to my heart. So my whole career has been focused on conservation in one way or another, and mostly conservation of endangered species, whether that's mostly animals, but also plants and ecosystems. We're learning now that you can't just save one animal. You've got to think about the whole ecosystem, and that ecosystem includes the people in the surrounding areas. So a good example of that is when I worked with the gorillas in Rwanda, Congo, and Uganda. Those gorillas are critically endangered. And the work that we did with those gorillas, saving one life, helped to save that species. In fact, our tagline with Gorilla Doctors is saving a species one gorilla at a time. But our work also expanded to a program called One Health. So not only were we working with gorillas as veterinarians, but we were also looking after the health and welfare of other animals in the park. We expanded that to looking at the health and welfare of some of the domestic animals outside the park, because the people who live outside the park are very poor. And if we don't look after those people and their animals, they're going to go and the gorillas could be threatened. But then we expanded that to offering examinations by a doctor to the people who live outside the park and to the park employees, because those are the people who work most closely with the gorillas. So, long story short, what I learned by my work in Rwanda is that you have to have a larger view of health of the endangered species. So it isn't just about the endangered species. And so that has translated here at the Wild. We have a number of endangered species. In fact, we have one species that is extinct in the wild. The Pear-David deer is an animal that is no longer found running free in its home area of China. And we have one of the largest herds in North America here. So they are found in human care. They're just no longer found running naturally. And we have a number of species, the Scimitar horned oryx I mentioned earlier, that we have bred here, and we are keeping herds of animals that are assurance herds, so that if something happens in the wild, we have these animals here, and if we can find a safe place for reintroduction, it could happen. But in addition to that, we've got these herds where we can teach you. Come out and see our animals, and we will teach you about these endangered species, but not just about the Pear-David deer. We might talk about China and the areas where it's from and why the animal is endangered, and what are the small things that we can do in our lives to maybe affect change. So it's a really big picture. Yeah, we have some critically endangered animals here at the Wild, and we are trying to look at the big picture about how we can affect positive change for these animals and their countries of origin.
Yes. And now you did mention that you have about 10,000 acres at the Wilds. About how many
We
animals
do.
do you have and how many species is that?
Right. So we've got about, I think, 28 different species and about 500 animals in our care. And they're on about 2,000 of those, that 10,000 acres. But we also have a department of ecology, conservation ecology, and they are looking at the animals on our property and the plants on our property. So we have done prairie restoration on abandoned mine lands, and some of the techniques we've developed here have been taken up by other mines in Ohio, because we've developed such good techniques for doing prairie restoration and wetland restoration here. We're looking at the native animals, which include bobcats and coyotes, bats. We have some what we think are endangered bats on property, so we've received some grants to look at those. We have some fantastic native Ohio birds on property, and we are working with Muskingum University. We've been looking at those grassland birds for 15 years at Muskingum University. We have associations with OSU, and somebody there has been looking at the pollinators, so all the different kinds of bees and butterflies that are in our prairies that keep that ecosystem healthy. So our 10,000 acres isn't just for our non-native species. We're also trying to restore the land to what used to be Ohio and to keep the land healthy, which means plants healthy, some of our native species healthy as well. So it's really just a global look at this 10,000 acres that we have.
Yes. So you did mention working with Muskingum University and Ohio State. Do you work with any of the local high schools here to help gauge interest and see if some of the high school aged kids are interested in zoology or at the wilds?
Several of us have given talks at the various high schools as well. Well, pre-COVID. So during COVID, we were starting to do some more virtual teaching. But yes, I've gone to several of the high schools here in the Zanesville area, over in Granville, and our education group, we do outreach for the fifth grade classroom, but we are also looking at ways that we can reach out to high schools. And I think that there are, with the virtual capabilities, there are so many ways that we could interact with high school age students.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. I know that my high school did offer a zoology class, and it was one of the more popular classes. So it sounds like it's still pretty popular. You said it's a very hot commodity, very competitive field.
Yeah, well, zookeeping certainly is, and yeah, my high school, I'll tell you, one of the big influences on me were my high school biology teachers. I went to a high school in Indianapolis, and I had some fantastic science teachers in high school that um, really motivated me to follow my dream. And so that's, for any of the listeners who are in high school and starting to think about career, find those teachers that really know the area that you're interested in, and pick their brains and learn as much as you can from them, because teachers can really help you choose a path, and at least choose your first path to take your first steps. And then from there, you'll find other mentors as you move on in life.
You heard it here, folks. Talk to your teachers. Don't be shy. Don't be in the back of the classroom quiet. Talk to your teachers and get their advice and let them help you. Let them help you make your decision. If you go to college, if college isn't really your choice, what field you might be best fitted for. All right. We do have a
Yeah, there
few.
are some great technical high schools. We work very closely with a technical high school here that has a veterinary technology program. And so those high school students, when they get out, they can actually be a veterinary assistant and go and get a job. And so I suspect there are things like that in the Columbus area, but I know there are out here in the Zanesville area. and we work very closely with them. And also veterinary technology and veterinary assistant, that is something that you can do with, um, well, veterinary assistant you can do either on the job or with some non-college training, and veterinary technology as well. You can do a 2-year degree, a technical degree, or you can get a bachelor's degree. So those are careers that you might want to consider as well if you want to work with animals. And maybe going to college and veterinary school is not for you, but you still want to work with animals. Those are great careers.
Yeah. Do you see a typical type of employee come through the door? Is it typically someone that's more outgoing, someone that might keep to themselves, or a good mix of both?
Well, I think it's a good mix of both, and it really depends on what job. So if somebody's coming to do a job as an animal keeper, that person usually comes to us with some experience, and usually that person is pretty outgoing and pretty self-motivated, right? So I think that's the thing that as a high school student, you can try to start stepping out of your comfort zone and doing some of the things that might help you learn, which would be volunteering maybe at a place where if you can't get a job, at least volunteer and get that experience. And sometimes that's a little intimidating, but stepping out of your comfort zone will really, really help you grow. And that's what I see in the people that work here are people who have taken that step and are pretty self-motivated.
That's awesome. We do have a few more questions here that our audience is writing in. Um, what advice would you give to a youth or young adult that wants to be a zookeeper?
Well, I would say if you are interested in being a zookeeper, then it is important to um, go make yourself known at your local zoo and try to volunteer. Find out what your local zoo requires for that kind of employment. And sometimes you can either volunteer or get a seasonal job, and and just find out what the requirements are, and also think about taking some maybe community college classes in animal behavior to see if that's really what you like, either animal behavior or biology, to see if that's what you like, and just put your toe in the water. And if you find out that isn't what you want to do, you might find that there are some doors that will open that you didn't even know existed as you start exploring those job opportunities. So maybe you think you want to be a zookeeper, but you find out what you really like is education. So you do conservation education through a zoo or a center. So it's just putting yourself out there and study hard.
Yes, I'm sure there's quite a few tests you have to pass, and they're not probably not easy tests either.
Well, I think just to learn what you need to do to be successful.
Yes. All right, we have a few more questions here. What would be one word that would describe you?
Me, huh? Um, it depends on who you ask. My kids might say I'm a goofball. I guess I'm positive. I'm a positive person.
I definitely get that vibe. Definitely. Everything you've talked about today has been in a positive light, always looking for the light at the end of the tunnel. Sure, it might be some hard work now, but it's going to pay off in the end.
Right.
So, our typical host, Daniel Reyes, is actually here watching. So, I know he has a few fun questions that he usually asks. And one of those is, what's your favorite food?
My favorite food. Well, my go-to comfort food is a grilled Swiss cheese sandwich and tomato soup. I love it.
Okay. All right. The grilled cheese does sound pretty good right about now.
Doesn't it? Yeah, yeah. These
Especially
cool
as
days.
it's getting cooler outside. Yes.
And you can get
As
a
it does.
really good grilled cheese sandwich at Tom's Ice Cream Bowl right here in Zanesville. And then you can top that off with an ice cream sundae at the end.
As it does start to get cooler outside, does that change how you guys work at the Wilds a little bit? Do you typically try and work during the warmer hours with the outside animals?
Right. So it does change because some of our animals have to come in where it's heated. So our giraffes have a heated barn that they come into. In fact, they're already in for the winter. They can go out on warm days, but they come in at night. Our rhinos have to come in when it gets, below the freezing mark. And so the rhinos came in last weekend when it got cold, but they're back out now. Some of our African antelope have to come in from pasture and they have access to heated barns. So yeah, our working hours don't change, but how
Mm-hmm.
the animals changes so that warm and warm.
Gotcha. So, what is going on at the Wilds right now with the seasons changing? Do you guys do any holiday advertising? Are you open throughout the winter, or should we wait till spring to come visit you?
Oh no, you can still come visit. We did bus tours just stopped this past weekend, and it's just a little one of those open air buses. But our overnight at the Straker cabins that sleeps they're six each, or our lodge which can sleep up to 12. And then we have a winter at the wilds tour, which is really a lot of fun because you go visit the barns, and the rhinos, I'll just say, really really like to be petted. They're kind of like dogs.
Oh,
So those tours are available. So all winter we have those tours. We don't really do any kind of a Christmas tour or anything. The zoo does. The zoo has the beautiful lights, and you guys are all aware of that, but we don't do that. And then we open, sort of partially open in April, and then our regular season is from May through October. So start looking for the regular season information coming this spring.
all right. That sounds awesome. And I do have one more question here for you. It's one of the more fun questions. If you could have one superpower, what would that be and why?
One superpower. Oh, this is a loaded question because you've got to be really careful about which superpower you choose. Um, I think if I had one superpower, it would be to, and this is just me being a Pollyanna, I would want to be able to change all hate in the world to tolerance and love. And that would be my superpower.
We sure do need it sometimes.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes, yes. Well, Jan, it's been great talking with you today. If you have any last words for our viewers, I know that they've been really interactive with us here. Um, do you have any last words you'd like to tell our youth and young adults that we serve?
Well, I'll just reiterate what I said earlier is, put yourself out there and go after your dream, and don't give up on that dream. It might take you a long way, a long time to get there, and the dream may change along the way, but know that if you work hard, um, you might have some setbacks and there might be challenges, but you can get there, and you just have to keep putting yourself out there and keep trying and accept the setbacks and don't let them defeat you. So, and if there's any way that I can help in the future, let me know.
Very much. And thank
And
you,
come
Jan, for
check us a
being.
while.
Yes, yes, we all need to go visit. Maybe we can go as a CLC staff outing.
That's right.
Yes. Well, thank you, Jan, so much for being with us today. It's been a pleasure talking with you. I'm sure we're going to get a lot of feedback from our youth about how great this interview was today. So thank you again.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thanks for the opportunity.
It was our pleasure. All right, guys. Well, we will see you next week in A Walk in My Shoes. We have a special guest star, so stay tuned and watch our social media for who that will be.